Good evening and welcome to Rail Natter. As my phone, actually my work phone, drops to the floor. There's one for James to get out. Hello, James. It's Rail Natter, everyone. We're live. It's a Wednesday at 8 p.m. Look at this. There's a new fancy landing page to remind you that we're happening and Rail Natter is a thing. Yeah. Also, Eric Brian Stone is sick of this being late. Yeah, too right, Eric. Absolutely. There is sound. We're here. Yeah, welcome to hello, James Bedford, catching live on For Once in a Blue Moon. Yes. This is a fun one. We've got some things to talk about. It's going to be good, but I am trying to accelerate this into being tightness. Yeah, today we're talking about the rather bafflingly named North-South West Wales feasibility. Feasibility? Question mark? I don't know what. This is a very weirdly named report. It's baffling. Also, the classification of this is sensitive/sensible. That's right, because Atkins Realis is now Canadian rather than being a British company as Atkins was. Everything has to be, or all the standard company stuff is like bilingual. So it's sensible in Quebecois. Sensible. Shout out to all the Quebecois joining us in this one. Timing impeccable in this one. Yeah, this is an interesting one. Let's see. So some fun things that we need to talk about in this report. But before we do that, I must just say this episode is only possible and ad-free because of our wonderful Patreon supporters. So thank you very much indeed to you. Everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the Intercity 225 fades away, I'm hoping that, as I can't click away because the music will stop, I'm hoping that the audio is sounding a little less noisy. I've done a few tweaks that I may end up having to reverse if I can't get the Skype has been switched off, which means that I have, for guest episodes, I'm having to completely rebuild the setup, and I don't know whether it's going to work. So the noise might be back next time there's a guest episode, because anyway, that's for me to worry about, not for you to worry about. But a little peek behind the curtain there. Yes, we are here. In fact, we are here to start. We must start by talking about the news. And to do the news, I'm going to make my face appear in the bottom corner. Hello, it's me. Hello, look, it's medium-sized face in the bottom. Yes, we're here to talk. I reminded myself how I was going to introduce the episode, actually, which was to make my large face appear a bit earlier on. But anyway, right, next time. We're getting there. The format is evolving, everyone. Right, the news. Germany's causing problems. There's been a joint letter from the European Rail Freight Association, essentially pointing out that Germany is a major problem. Rail freight operations on the German network have become increasingly complex and costly, with a lot of uncertainty for customers. While the tip of the iceberg is what is called the Generalsanierung program, which is the massive program of upgrades across the network. But while they strongly support infrastructure investment, prolonged closures of main corridors are not standard practice. Sufficient and economically feasible diversion capacity must be provided in every case to keep business on the rail. If this cannot be guaranteed, the approach must be reviewed and adapted accordingly. Absolutely right. It's the same as we know in GB that we cannot just close lines without diversions available. The trouble is because of our fragmented network, we don't have trained drivers to operate on those diversion routes. Now, that isn't so much of a problem on the mainland because, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but by and large, they don't use route knowledge to the same extent. So you, as a driver, you can be guided onto a new section of line. Now, catch me if I'm incorrect on that one, European mainland folks. So anyway, the theme of all this is that Germany is causing serious problems. And why might it be causing serious problems? Well, it's because Germany is in the way of everything. So here's a nice European rail map. Also, forget those guys. But if we just look at the EU main connectivity, you'll see there's this blob here that is in the way of it's very difficult to see. There's a blob here that kind of finds its way in the way of everything. If you want to go up into Scandinavia, Germany's in the way. If you want to go from, pray tell, the UK, across to Eastern Europe, Germany's in the way. If you want to go from Italy, Spain and Spain and Portugal across up to the Baltics, Germany's in the way. And the problem with the German rail network is it's rubbish. It's a serious problem. Whether it's better for freight, but a challenge in terms of infrastructure quality, but from a passenger perspective, really bad. But certainly here, this is the ERFA pointing out that it's a serious problem. So a real mess that really ought to be sorted out. What next? What else have we got? Yes, open access operations are still bad. This report has been circulating. An interesting one, actually, because this has come from a report which I hope to be getting hold of very soon, and we will go through it in a future Rail Natter, which should be very interesting. But basically a report that laying out that open access operations on the East Coast mainline have cost LNER £1.1 billion or will cost £1.1 billion of revenue extraction over the next decade. So it's about 100 million quid a year, or 110 million quid a year. That's a lot of money. And over the last 20 years, there has been a loss of about 562 million pounds if those open access operators were not operating alongside LNER. What we need to look at in the report, which I don't know, is whether they look at if LNER had been running those services itself, if the incumbent had just been running the services as they quite recently could have. So it'd be interesting to understand that, whether it's just saying displaced paths for existing trains, or whether it's saying, if they were being run by the incumbent, what would that mean in terms of benefit for ultimately for the taxpayer and for over a long period of time, and for the railway as a whole. So it'd be very interesting to dig into that report. I look forward to doing so. But Rail picked it up as I think it was broken by the Times, actually, the Sunday Times maybe. We will pick through. I think I've managed to get hold of that report, so we will be going through it, and that should be very interesting. The latest on Glasgow Airport. So we made the front cover. The main cover story of the Glasgow Bell today is a very nice chat that I had with Moya. There's going to be an article I was going to write, but actually I didn't have time. Far better was for me to have a chat with Moya, who's brilliant anyway. Moya Lothian-McLean, who has very nicely written up the chat that we had. I've not seen the whole chat written up because I don't actually have a subscription to the Bell. If anyone does have a subscription to the Bell, tell me if you enjoy it, and if I'm going to get sacked again. The thing is, I've not said anything controversial, even though this says controversial prediction. But I'm not saying anything that's grand. If people are really seriously suggesting that they think Glasgow Airport is going to be open in the 2040s, I'm fascinated to know why they think that's the case, and that they think everything will be the same by then, because it really won't be. So, interesting. Hopefully, an interesting little write up, and interested to see what you think on that one. Should be interesting. Next bit of news. We back to the Channel Tunnel, actually, as kind of an emerging theme at the moment, mostly because I'm thinking about it a lot, writing a report about it. Philip Hay picking up the fact that the Transport Secretary has signed a deal with the Swiss government, talking about developing a direct rail link between the two countries. Now, John Worth, in his excellent work that he's doing about cross-channel connectivity, points out that this is by far the most realistic, likely candidate for another direct link. And what that might look like, and the fact that the Swiss on their side are already advancing this. They because of the Swiss approach to public transport, they went, we have a strategic gap. Aviation capacity is simply not enough for the routes that the journeys that we expect to need to facilitate from an economic perspective, among other things. And so, what do we have as an alternative? Well, rail is an alternative, and potentially quite high capacity alternative. So they've been exploring it way ahead of us, but now the Secretary of State for Transport is sort of catching up in their wake, in the Swiss's wake, and will hopefully something might happen at this. But the main challenge is that things need to happen in St Pancras Station before any more trains are operating, so that there's work to be done. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things that have been agreed. Sharing of information, expertise on policy on international rail services, including market access. Okay, understanding the practical requirements for border and security controls. Interesting. So to see what they could do there, that's might lead the way in showing how stupid our current approach is, particularly in terms of security. Identifying relevant technical and safety regulations that apply. Well, that's an hour's job. Fine. noting the unique requirements operating through the Channel Tunnel. That's not a problem, and it never really is. Again, John Worth wrote a fantastic long blog on that, and John we're going to get John on the podcast to talk about that stuff in great detail. Cooperating with relevant infrastructure managers to work out what needs to be done from an infrastructure capacity side along the route. Yep, fine. Facilitating dialogue with interested operators to develop appropriate commercial arrangements. So Evelyn, Eurostar, and Virgin will be looking at that as the kind of key front runners at the moment. And yeah, I know my face is on top of the bottom two bullet points. Any other forms of collaboration as approved by the participants? Okay, so not hugely interesting, that last one. So fine. Okay. Closer than any previous proposal, I would suggest, for kind of, closer, more advanced than even the ICE stuff, I would suggest. What about this? Man who created mess, unhappy about mess. Yeah, it's George Osborne, the architect of austerity politics, or modern austerity politics, saying that he's unhappy that the railway project across the north has been binned off, what he calls Northern Pass Rail. Interesting. You could simply have made it that this would have got built, George Osborne, rather than the opposite of that. How very interesting. Yeah. So, new holder of most solid plans for a section of NPR. Yeah, that's right. Because on a similar theme, we have had today published a plan about connecting the northwest of basically creating a what they're calling the Liverpool to Manchester Railway, but modern. Backbone of the Northern Arc, which seems to be what they're calling. Well, I don't know what they're calling it, but anyway. I don't know whatever it is. They've created a report about it, and what they're essentially proposing. Oh yeah, wait a minute. Let me just change a thing, which is for me to do something about this and this. Yeah, fine. What they're essentially proposing is enhanced on-network upgrades to the lines connecting Chester and Crewe to Warrington Bank Quay here. So that's just the West Coast Main Line, nothing very exciting. And then new lines with two different options between Liverpool Lime Street and Liverpool Gateway, which will serve the airport at Liverpool. Why? I don't know. Well, maybe it's not such a bad idea if the airport gets converted into something useful. So a connection from Lime Street through Liverpool Gateway into Manchester Airport and up to Manchester Piccadilly. So new line, basically kind of aping bits of HS2. This proposed Cheshire connector is the HS2 bit from ear to here. Okay. Now, extensive thoughts on this in the future. We're not going to talk about it now. We're going to get Chris Howe on from many places, journalist and video creator extraordinaire, to talk about this and the many guises of these plans. The key thing I want to just say is how these overlay with our proposals for high-speed network in the area, which is, well, not far off, basically. You can see kind of nominally similar proposals about what the railway will do in the Warrington area, so, providing a station there, into Lime Street, so getting the low-level station at Lime Street. We have not proposed a connection to the airport. We go north to avoid that mess, and arguably a bit of an easier alignment by doing so. We also smooth the link to the airport, and we get rid of the stupid George Osborne kink, and we propose a smoother alignment and a big triangle junction to provide Liverpool north and south connectivity. And of course, in Manchester, we also have our, as yet, perhaps imperfect proposals for what happens with services moving in a north-south axis and an east-west axis, or kind of themes thereof. So we'll revisit episode 222, which covered this in some detail in the future, I'm sure, and we'll look at service patterns and what that might look like and how that drives the arrangement of stations. But that's for the future. But yeah, you can see, you can sort of see that fair enough. However, I have problems. Problems being, Steve Rotherham, I've got much negative to say about Steve, other than the non-tram bus thing that they've been pronouncing as being wonderful. Well, I am frustrated because we're seeing Steve here talking about a new Liverpool to Manchester railway would significantly reduce journey times between the two cities. Oh dear. Okay, right. Have we learned nothing from HS2? Because a lot of the replies to this are going, the journey's already quick. How are you going to beat 35 minutes on a longer route, which is frankly a quite reasonable query on what is frankly a very short distance between Liverpool and Manchester? So I would never overplay the journey time benefits along here, let alone let alone the fact that it is by far a lesser priority of why you build this line. You build this line because in and of itself it creates an enormous amount of dedicated capacity, but also because it frees up the existing remaining network to become suburban-style, high-frequency electric services. That is not being mentioned here at all. That would be what I'd be leading with. You're creating 2 or 3 new urban railway lines by building this third high-speed, by building this high-speed route. So this is an extremely frustrating repeat of all the mistakes we've seen made by HS2. It's just, they're already screwing it up. And frankly, it means that this, unless they change tack, this will not change. Hi, Rail Focus, by the way. This is just, and you know what, Rail Focus, who's saying, I can see the comments already, who wants to get to Manchester 10 minutes quicker? Those people are correct, because it doesn't matter. That isn't, the arguments kind of didn't apply for HS2, because the point of HS2 is that actually the speediness is very valuable for creating the connectivity from further away parts into the hub station, then down to another hub station, then out again, so the connecting journeys, so it makes the overall rail proposition much more viable. Here, where the journey time benefit is minimal, frankly, because it will be minimal, you're not going to eke 10 minutes, big deal. This is not making a huge difference to the other connective journeys. So it really is even more than it was about for HS2. This is about the capacity. This is just an extremely frustrating misfire, I would say, on what should have been a very important announcing moment. Also, folks, why are you not contacting me about it? Quite bluntly, you might say, well, you're not important. Yes, no, you should be contacting me about this stuff, Steve and team. You should be contacting me, because there is no one who knows how to sell this railway better to the public than me. So come and speak to me about it. Do that. Others have been about some of their proposals. LMR and the team behind it, your lack of contact with me to talk about this stuff and consult on how you should be communicating this to the public is going to bring you into cropper territory. So get on that. This kind of then leads us into the point about, well, who is talking about this? Who have they got specifying this? Have they got a bunch of engineers, or have they got a bunch of pure or applied consultants working on this project and therefore doing a bad job of understanding what the actual benefits are supposed to be? Have they got a bunch of people who were working on HS2 feasibility to just jump over, and they are with lower budgets basically just providing them the comms feed? Yeah, it's this is a problem. And so we come to the theme of tonight's episode, basically, which is this feasibility report. And I'm sorry, Atkins Realis, but I will be naming and shaming not individuals involved in the report. I've actively redacted those people from the version of the report that I'll put on screen tonight. But as an organization, my former employer, and lots of people I know about and have and care a great deal about who work for this organization, this is bad. I'm just going to give you a little teaser, everyone, but I am not happy about the quality of this report, or even anything about it whatsoever. This is just a little spoiler alert, and we're going to get into it in a moment. But first, a bit of context, right? A bit of context is really important. Do chuck over your questions, by the way. If you've got a question, remember to @ me, and your name will appear my name will appear in red, which will allow me to spot that you've sent me a question. Joseph J, I'm very glad that you're joining. To anyone who's joining today, hello. I want to. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's press on with this, shall we? And kind of, yeah. So the first thing I want to do is sort of say a fun thing, which is this is the way that Atkins do document numbers. This is the project number. So this is the project number of the job, and this is 5225267. I'm glad to see this still using 5-number codes, because that's familiar to me, because I used to use 5-number codes in my projects. Indeed, the last project that I worked on for Atkins, which was the best part of a decade ago at this point, was project 5147129 Crossrail Anglia Group 3 to 5. What's fun about that is that means that since I left Atkins-ish, there are 78,138 projects have been initiated, if not progressed, within the organization, which is kind of interesting, right? That's a big number. Yeah. So yes, fine. Very, very nice. Is this relevant? No, not hugely. So we kind of start with the geography of this corner of Wales, because what we're currently talking about is the connectivity between. You know what? Let's get Open Railway Map up, shall we? Let's get Open Railway Map up. Open Railway Map. Let's get Open Railway Map up. Put it up here and zoom in to Wales to sort of show you what's going on. So here's Wales. Here's Wales. Lovely Wales. Should we get max speeds up? Yeah. Let's get max speeds up. So here's Wales. You can see that we have two very different types of railway. We have the North Wales Main Line in north of Wales here, which runs across basically from Chester through Llandudno to Bangor and then up to Holyhead. Shout out to Gareth. Hello, Gareth. I know you're here. Gareth territory, not me, Gareth. Regular friend of the show, patron supporter, Gareth over here in the chat, regular. Anyway, yeah, I digress. So, mainline rail at the top, just 90, 75 miles an hour. Decent, could be greatly improved, including capacity. Fund the North Wales mainline upgrade projects, please. But down here you have the Cambrian Coast Line, which connects up from Aberdyfi. The line splits at Dyfi Junction, not Aberdyfi. So it splits at Dyfi Junction, but the service is basically kind of split functionally at Machynlleth. Got up the coast through Barmouth, Harlech, Porthmadog, and out to Pwllheli. And it's kind of a rural line, but it's very much it's a railway that I think could be made more use of, actually, not least for freight. But it's a lifeline to a pretty isolated rural community, and I'm glad it still exists, and it rightly should do. Very beautiful for holiday makers, but also a very much a community lifeline. Now, there used to be a railway connection between these two bits of railway. There used to be. And if I click back onto infrastructure, by the way, you'll notice the cool colours along here. That's because the Cambrian Coast Line is very slow. It's a very, very slow railway, and much of it is extremely slow, in fact. So, 20 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, just extremely slow bit of railway that should be running much quicker. Anyway, you'll notice here there is a former bit of railway that runs this dark dashed line. And that's kind of part of what we're going to be talking about tonight. But I'm afraid not as much as you would like, because actually, as you'll see with this report, getting ahead of itself is the wrong way to describe it. It just goes off in a completely wrong direction. I'm going to explain why momentarily. But first, the railway. So here's this nice map from 1920. The railway we're talking about is within this blob, and it goes from Bangor up here at the top end. Color. Let's change my color point to ink color. Let's go for a bright yellow. So from Bangor up here down to the junction, which is down here at Afon Wen, which is kind of a bit along from Pwllheli, facing in decidedly the wrong direction to reach Pwllheli, but facing the correct direction to get down to for example, the larger spot. Porthmadog is kind of the larger station along the route, sort of where you'd potentially exchange services. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. This is the route, the former railway route. But you've all watched Rail Natter. You all, or have you? If you haven't, then why are we starting with a former railway line? Because, as you know, that is not where to start when thinking about new transport connections. But let's park that for a moment. Why is that being looked at? Well, partly it's being looked at because Transport for Wales, as the organisation who is ostensibly the client organisation in the situation, is basically, I don't know how to describe this. Appeasing is the wrong word. It's perhaps satisfying someone within TFW and perhaps lots of people outside of TFW's itch to reconnect Wales's railways north-south, but along the west coast of Wales. So, here's the north bit here going from Afon Wen up to via Dinas and Carnarvon to Bangor. There we go. So that's the connection of that bit up there, and then also the kind of the common bit of railway that I've talked about frustratedly before, which is Aberystwyth Carmarthen, which is about £1 billion. Immediate red flag on here is the fact that they say closed 1964, closed 1965. If we're building new railway lines, we absolutely should not be caring about when former lines were closed or where they are, at least not at feasibility stage. Or certainly not in sort of scoping stage about where the line was at. So, key factor here, this element, this story. But as we know, jump us forward, sorry. Back in episodes 116, and indeed before that in episode, I think, like 53 or something, we talked about where a new north-south mainline should be in Wales, and we described the fact that it absolutely should not go up the west coast. This is wrong, and it should follow a route that actually does a far better job of joining up all of the existing cross-Wales railway lines. Now, why is it important for it to do that? Well, it's because doing so gives you far better journey times from everywhere that's currently rail connected in Wales to everywhere else that's currently rail connected in Wales. Going up the west coast doesn't solve any of your connectivity problems for places in the east of the country. It doesn't do anything to fix those at all. But actually, if you provide this spine up through Wales, what you do is enable far better connectivity for the places that are, that are not, let's say, that are at the fringe in either direction. That you could challenge that in the northern end, but the reason I respond to that is that actually what you do at the northern end, because you have the higher speeds of the North Wales mainline and speeds that could be improved further, actually you basically fractal all the stuff in this direction, because the geography through Snowdonia is, let's say, extremely challenging. National park, those are battles you shouldn't be fighting. And the terrain is just extremely challenging. So I think, and also it's the fact that the population density is here. And so you get the population density here, you connect it up with the existing railways in other parts of Wales here, and that's why you put the main line there. Little critical beat for you. So that's why you put that there, right? Now, another episode I want to refer back to is episode 214, which is about finishing the Borders Railway with maps and routes. Now, in that episode, we pointed out, and this is a quote we've used extensively, I think we first picked it up in the Woodhead episode eons ago, which is just because closing a railway is a bad idea doesn't mean reopening it is a good idea. That was from back in 2020. And we worked out that the way to, within that, the justification for any kind of railway, any railway project, and we went through this again more recently with the Scotland Railway Network episode, is that you have to think about local, regional, and national connectivity and the way that your line benefits all of them. Because if it doesn't provide meaningful benefits for all of these, then it is not a place where we should be investing resources. There are other priorities that should be further up the list, right? So you have to understand what the local, regional, and national benefits, impacts are of any proposal. That's critical. And also, understanding the possibilities requires us to imagine a new railway, not a reopened one. So that's a really critical point that we have to cover here, right? So, saying that, let's pick up the report. Let's pick this up. Let's do the old page turn. Have a little think about what this is. Before I do this, I'm just going to very quickly go big face. Hello, it's me in big face. Also, I'm using this as a test to check that the sound. How's the sound quality, by the way? Is the sound all sound? Did the intro sound fine? I asked this because I'm applying a filter to my mic, but not the other sound. So it's interesting to just check that it's all sounding good your end. Do tell me, those with the good ears can tell me what they're thinking in terms of how it's sounding. All good? Everyone happy? Yes, sound is F. Stuart Broadbent. Oh, good. Yeah, you don't scare me. Right, so let's go medium face again, because my strangely green face needs to start thinking about peeling through this PDF. So, published on the 30th of January 2025, so a wee while ago now. As I say, it's called the North South West Wales Feasibility. Very strange name for a report, just bizarre. The first draft of this was back in December 23, so a good while back now. The client is TFW, the project is weirdly named, and the job number is even more weirdly named. So that job number is just the number we were talking about earlier for funsies. Right, so what is this? We've got 218 pages of report. 280. I love that they're still using the same word form, like word template that I was using when I was at in fact, it's even using the same font colors that I was using when I was at Atkins. Just baffling. 219 pages, including the cover. So we have got, let's have a look at the structure. We've got an introduction. We've got history of the route. History of the route. Okay. Well, right. Summary of previous studies. Good. That looks good. Identification of design parameters. Spoiler alert, by the way, I have pre-flicked through this, so I know what the problems are. This is why I'm grumpy about it. And then, what's this? 40 like over 100 pages dedicated to a route alignment review of a feasibility report. Okay, well, in a feasibility report, there should be more pages dedicated to why, who, and then to what? Okay, environment review and land boundary review, a summary, and then some drawings, and okay, fine. So that's what. Right. Okay. So let's just pass over the executive summary. We're going to just ignore the executive summary. We're going to start with the scheme overview, and this is why I have put the I've put that map in earlier. So we have. Transport for Wales is an aspiration to improve the north to south transport offering in West Wales by exploring the potential for reopening the disused rail routes between Bangor to Afon Wen and Aberystwyth to Carmarthen as shown in the map below. Just going to point out, this is not actually the official policy position of Transport for Wales at this point. The official position of Transport for Wales is on their website, and it is that they will prioritise bus for north-south connectivity, which I think is the right thing to do, actually, is to prioritise and indeed make changes to road infrastructure to prioritise a north-south express bus service that does a good job of connecting up those existing infrastructure routes, railways and other bus routes. And that they have aspirations long-term to consider heavy rail, but that existing routes are too slow to make any sense, and that the long-term aspiration is actually to look at a new corridor, if not a completely new route, connecting north and south. So actually, they're much more pragmatic in the public position than this report seems to imply. And so WELTAG, which is the Welsh Government Transport Appraisal Guidelines, has recommended the review of reopening these missing links in the longer term to both improve local services, but also to facilitate the aspiration of supporting long distance journeys between North and South Wales. Okay, so scheme overview, they're talking about some level of strategic thought on what that might look like in the very brief overview. So, okay, fine. So here's the scope. The remit of this particular project, ECS3 Work Package Order 222. Okay, so this is where they get the get out of jail free card, is that there is a chance, Atkins, you may get away with all my complaints here may well be entirely deflected into the client organization for what's written in that work package order. But I don't know, and I'm going to assume the worst in this situation, I'm afraid, because you should know better. It's to carry out a feasibility study, this is the worrying bit, into the reinstatement of the disused railway line between Bangor and Afon Wen. I'm going to need my drops board for this, aren't I? I'm bringing the drops board up because this is going to be painful. What? Into the reinstatement of the disused railway line between Bangor and Afon Wen. Well, that's a bad start. Straight off the bat. Good grief. Okay. Since its closure in the 1960s, the former alignment has been blah, 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 blah. Has been reused for different alternative uses, from road schemes to steam heritage railways to business farming use. Therefore, the proposal is to consider the advantages of using light rail and tram train technology. What? This is a feasibility study. What are we doing going, it's going to be tram train at this point? What? Feasibility study shouldn't be looking at, the feasibility study should be going, what are we going to do along this corridor? Not, we've already decided, or that it's going to be light rail, tram train. Oh, golly. So, oh boy. Yeah, I'm not happy about this one, folks. So, this is extremely bad. So the scope is wrong. Like, I go through this. So there's a number of key assumptions: standard gauge, single track with passing places. Why is that an assumption? Why am I assuming that? Suitable to reliably operate an hourly train services as minimum, capable of later upgrade to 30-minute interval services. So why are we assuming then that it's single track with passing places? At this stage, you should be going, to be honest, you shouldn't even be deciding what the service pattern should be. That should be part of the feasibility study. Rolling stock will be high floor to be compatible with standard height main platforms. Fine. Design speeds. Why are we considering design speeds at this point? Minimum radius. Why is P8 wheel profile? Why are we talking about wheel profiles in a feasibility study? We will come back to this, folks. Right. So the scope of this feasibility study is to review the track alignment and major civil engineering interventions required only in order to reinstate the former railway. And so this isn't saying, and that's why we're not going to look at other routes. This is just saying we're not going to look at electrification, signalling, telecoms, drainage. You can tell this has been written by an engineer, folks. It's not good. This is really not good at all. So whilst I continue to be very unhappy, let's crack on. So I've lined up my here we go. So let's see. It is noted. Let's see what else. Stations. I don't think about stations. Generically stations. Okay, it's noted that the route will provide a local public transport service in the area, therefore, wherever possible in alignment. Which this is, however, future modelling will be required on the train service to be offered, and an exercise undertaken to understand the trade-offs between the benefits of additional station. No. Backwards, upside down. The infrastructure, the engineering, comes way after you understand what people need from this corridor, what strategically and locally is needed from this corridor. Oh, not good. Extremely not good. So there's the scope. They're splitting the into 5 key route sections. I don't care. So there's the report structure. We've already had a look at the contents page, right? So feasibility assessment criteria. So, right. For each obstruction identified, the report will always identify an option. Okay. Nevertheless, so this is basically saying we're going to look at the alignment and we're going to maybe deviate from the existing railway, the former railway, a few times. The level of impact for the engineering challenge categories. Okay, this would be fine if there was actual feasibility considerations happening. This is, what's the strategic role of this line? Why are we considering what rolling stock and single track things are happening? This is very much cart before horse. We're not looking at nodes before modes. This is a real problem. Big focus on engineering stuff. Yeah, messy, really messy. History of the route. Now, again, this is setting the wrong exam question. Why are we looking at the existing? If the exam question should have been, if I bring Open Railway Map back up, the exam question should have been: we want to connect, we want to provide services and interconnectivity that hit Bangor, Carnarvon, and Porthmadog. We want to connect Porthmadog, Carnarvon, and Bangor. We want to understand what and therefore what are the infrastructure options to achieve that. That should have been the scope for this feasibility study. This is so for them to be going, no, we're following an existing route, and here's the history of that route. Now, in the last time I did one of these, I did look at the history because the history was pertinent because the railway route followed broadly, achieved the corridor, and we started with the corridor and described that, and then went into the history of the route and explained that. In this situation, the history of we should be starting with what are the nodes and therefore what are the options, not, oh, here's the old railway line, we're going to use that. This is, yeah. So the fact that we're going into history so rapidly is a real problem and challenge. So, fine. This is section 3. And that's it. What? A summary of previous studies, 2 paragraphs. Reading through this, there is absolutely no clear evidence of why the scope choices have been made. So what I would expect is for that previous little reference, the scope document, the kind of the scope, the reference in the scope to whatever the work package was, to explain, and spoiler alert for the consultancies, if you are unwilling to challenge your scope and improve on it, then you have to, and you believe, and you as you should have, you've got skilled staff who should know better than the authors of this report, frankly. This is your opportunity to this is your get out of jail free card. You say why your scope is crap. This is the point where you put, my scope is crap, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's the same for any job I've done where the scope is limited, where it's a thing that I can't do, that I think the railway would be better, but I'm unable to implement or propose that change. I will say why in the bit that says this is the scope I've been given and this is the restriction on what I'm looking at. So, 2 paragraphs. Within here, there is no clear evidence of why the scope choices have been made. Indeed, some of the text within here seems to contradict the report's scope choices. So, let's read this. TfW have advised that a WellTag 1 study has been completed for the wider review of north to south connections in West Wales, which recommended that in the short to medium term attention is focused on bus-based solutions. Good. Yep, agree with that fully. Which will be developed under parallel commissions to this project. Fine. However, the WellTag 1 study did additionally propose the development of options for longer-term rail-based solutions. Nothing about the specifics of a route. Noting these would be longer-term schemes due to the scale of investment required to implement rail services along these corridors. So from what I'm reading here, there is no evidence that TFW have been. This is why I'm assuming in favour of TFW and against Atkins Realis, because there is no evidence. Atkins have not bothered to lay out the evidence as to why they have done such a shitty job on this scope, on scoping this report. Yeah, so a number of red flags popping up here as to yikes, big yikes, and even larger yikes. So that's section 3. Section 4. Identification of design parameters. So by this point, you're going, wait a minute, identification of design parameters. Why are we talking about design before we've talked about, what the strategic outcomes are supposed to be, what the objectives are, what the success factors of any particular corridor are going to be? We've not talked about passenger numbers. We've not talked about population sizes. We've not talked about the alternatives, what the services look like today for public transport and alternatives. Within it, so one of the first things to talk about is a list of bloody standards. What the hell is this doing here? Well, I'll tell you what this is doing here. This is because the person who's written this is used to writing Form A's. This is someone who's used to writing engineering reports. This has been authored by an engineer, and well, I know that it's been authored by a civil engineer. Now, I'm not here to point fingers at individuals. The fact that this has been written in this way is not the fault of the individual. It's the fact that the person who's been tasked to write this is not competent, and the person who's reviewed it has not been competent to create a document of this type. We'll get to some of the bigger story problems about this later. Tram train vehicles. So the second section of this, we're talking about the bloody vehicles that are going to use it. It's already decided on an option, and it appears to be trying to engineer it. Why are we talking about what you could have had is different, again, way further into the report. You might have been looking at options for how might you, and also after you've looked at different broad route options, you might start looking at, well, here's some of the different options for how you would service if you went for a vehicle like this. This is how it would influence the viability of certain route options, and also how it would fit into the bigger strategic picture. But none of this. They've just gone, here's some details, here's some top trumps details that we've got off Wikipedia for the Class 398 tram train that's currently being used by TFW down south. They jump into signaling. We're talking about signaling systems, like all the sorts of detail about signaling, transition systems between tram and train. Who cares? Some stuff about heavy rail, light rail comparisons, and it's like, okay, well, are you going to talk about why you might go for it? No, nothing about why you pick between one of the two. Just like whether you decide you're going to run it in tram mode or train mode. Okay. We're starting to talk about gauge clearance and corridor width. Okay, again, this could be in a feasibility report way down if you were looking at a broad route of destruction, as it were, the path of impact. But this is like early in the report, and you've got bloody cross sections from a technical drawing. What is going on here? This is stations of passing. You've got station sites. Well, why are you putting stations there? Okay, it's possible station locations. What's this is just one short, a few paragraphs on station. The station is the gateway onto the railway system. This should be like a sizable chunk of the report should be dedicated into why are you putting a station where it is? What's the connectivity into that station? What's the travel to work distance difference you're going to make? How is things like isochrones for access to that station, tying into bus services? What's happening? What is going on here? Timetabling and journey times. Again, this is relevant once you've decided a series of options. But we start with they've put in historic timetables, and it's likely an average. It's not good. And then we go into section 5, and I'm afraid my frustration ramps up even further. Interfaces and constraints in section 5. Why the hell is a feasibility report talking about wheel rail interface issues? This is a report that has been written by engineers for engineers. It seems to be completely detached from any real usefulness for the communities and strategic questions under consideration. This should simply not be written in a feasibility report. Just shouldn't be mentioned. Just baffling that it's being considered and talked about at this stage. We've got section of traction power. Again, you can include this stuff, but only when it's way down secondary, tertiary stuff after you've talked about what is the corridor we should be including here. it's just look at all this detail, so you can see who's written this, because all of a sudden we've got paragraphs and paragraphs and tables. We've got loads of stuff about all this good stuff, and it gets worse. It gets worse again, because section 6, chapter 6, we still haven't talked about who this is serving, what this is for, and we're going into the design of the junctions. What are we doing here? So we're talking about the junctions. We've got track layouts for junctions. Yeah, but this is grip 3 stuff. This is not feasibility. This is not feasibility stuff. Look at all this detail. Oh, this is pig and shit. This is, oh yeah, I'm an engineer and I get to talk about engineering stuff. Great, but you're the wrong author for this report. So this is really, really frustrating. Then we get to section 7, which is then an extremely sort of reasonably subjective, but numbers heavy consideration of the infrastructure. And so you've got, all of a sudden you've got maps. And for anyone here who thought I was going to go in a detailed run through the route, I'm afraid that is not this isn't that episode, because this is not how we do things here. We do not, I won't be giving attention to the fact they're just basically tracing the former route and saying, oh, there's problems here, there's problems. This is, I don't quite know why Edge died there, but anyway, you can see it's just a little route. So it's just going through route stuff. Oh, that's right. It's not enjoying the pages that are in rotated around. That's right. Route stuff. I'm going to go through these. A warning that I'm going to speed up a bit through this. So we're on page 80. And we've got some drawings of like, maybe we do this, maybe we do this. Again, okay, this might be the way, but I'd be expecting one of these, one of them for heavy rail, one of them for heavy rail maybe providing a station elsewhere. But the first thing I'd be expecting is to see the nodes, to see the stations. Where are people? Why are you putting stations? Where are you putting stations? Understanding what, the balance of easiest, cheapest versus best for the local community. So we're going to whiz through all this. We're not going to dwell on this, because you can see all of a sudden just pages and pages and pages of stuff that is simply not. This is not what we should be seeing at this stage. This is an enormous amount of detail. There's an environmental review. Again, feasibility study, absolutely. But this feasibility study, you should have these with a big map that overlays all of the route options against these receptors, ideally with a link to an online version of the map for anyone to go in and have a look at. But it's just the existing route, just the existing former route, how it relates to environmental stuff, things like flooding and other environmental receptors. There's a land boundary review that's been done, and fine, presumably it's in an appendix somewhere, and then a summary. So it's just saying the proposed reopening of the Afon Wen to Bangor Railway. Atkins, I'm not convinced that this, if your scope said that's what this is for, then you should have been caveating that this particular element of the wider option, and also your report should have included all of the other options, at least in the scoping saying this, our specific scope is to just look at this option. But that's not what's been said in the scoping section. And if I was picking up this report and the scope of this, I would be challenging up to the clients like, no, you need, every penny, this is a waste of your money. And I will come back to that point, because every penny spent on this report, every taxpayer's penny in Wales spent on this report is a waste of money. Every penny has been wasted. Really, we'll get to this. So this is, you know what, right, let's go big face, because that's it. After that, it's a bunch of appendices, none of them are any use, and that's the document. So you can tell I'm not too happy about this one. What I would have been doing if I was given this document, or given this scope, I would have said, this isn't right. What we need to be doing is looking at broadly at this corridor. What are your key, challenging back to the client, right? What you actually need to be doing is going, these are your receptors. Am I correct? Are those your receptors? And I will build you a case to create a transport corridor. I will look at different options for a transport corridor. I will not decide on an answer, but I will give you, I might refer to a preferred option. I will not give you an answer. I will look at as many different options as I can within the budget you give me of how to get people from here to here via the nodes that you specify. And doing that will allow me to go, well, you get a big braided fan of different options, particularly in the geography around there. They might focus on sort of one or two obvious sort of routes with various options fanning in and out. And you might, with the budget available, then not spend much time on all the different braided options. Feasibility level, you don't need to necessarily. You can talk fairly kind of qualitatively about those, but you might end up with a few different potential broad thrusting routes, 1 or 2 or 3 kind of corridors that you get with options. And then for each of those, you then look at the different options of, well, how are we going to service those? Can they be serviced by, you could quickly dismiss a guided busway, but you can look at, the tram train option at one end, and then, what the service looks like in terms of local and regional and long distance services, and how that ties into the bigger picture, because there's nothing about how this ties into the bigger picture, nothing about how you make a case for this railway to actually exist. What service is it looking like? What is it going to carry? Freight? Are there potentially useful freight receptors along here? What do people locally want out of the railway? Nothing of that, absolutely none of that. And I can guarantee the budget to pay for this report is way more than the budget that went into the report that I did, that me and a few others did when I was a consultant in exactly this position, covering Borders Railway completion. So this is real bad, folks. This is really, really, really bad. Extremely frustrating. So let's talk about a few things very briefly, kind of go through this and say, well, so what? What I think the key point here is the question I want to ask: who and what is this for? This report, there's no consideration of nodes. First, and then there's no consideration of what the existing options are, and therefore what any future option need to compete with in terms of road travel. There's absolutely no mention of strategic objectives, success factors, policy objectives, things of this nature. This is very much an output, not an outcome-led report. And for a feasibility study, that means that it's broken. In fact, I'd go further and to say this is not a feasibility study. It simply is not a feasibility study. It's already decided an option. It's trying to engineer it. Why is it talking about wheel rail interface issues, signaling specifics? It's totally detached from the key questions that it needs to be answering. And discussions about junction design, and also no discussion about what needs to happen next. What happens next to turn this into reality. A feasibility study needs to consider that. It needs to talk about, well, what happens next to make this feasible. Not considered at all. The other thing is, I'm kind of in escalating order of problems with this report. The pre-selected scope, it's almost as if it's been selected to ensure that this doesn't hang up, that it doesn't work, that this doesn't happen. The scope, whether it's wrong from the client side or not, Atkins Realis should have challenged this. They should have challenged the scope. They should have challenged it in terms of what the overall sort of plan for the work is. That what the nodes are. They should have challenged the scope on this one. It's really shocking. And in the section where they talk about what the scope is, they don't really talk about what the scope is at all in any detail, and certainly they don't provide any evidence as to why this current scope has been decided and how that fits into the bigger policy picture. This is appalling. It's the worst report that we've done a page turn on, I think. Is it worse than the IRP? Certainly on par. I wish I'd had my report classifying document before. So it's certainly on par with the IRP, the Integrated Rail Plan, for those new to RailNatter. Rail Focus is asking, would I be far off from saying penning this report would probably pay for the moving of speed boards on the Wrexham Bidston line? Yes, it would. I say that as the person who wrote the report into doing that. If you want to see what a report looks like, that report is very interesting and ought to be publicly available. If anyone wants to write the FOI on what that report looks like, so I can make sure that it finds its way to the public domain, or rather, I wouldn't, but Arcadis would, and TFW would, because they own the report. Then speak to me after this. Anyway, so let's do this. What are we saying? What is the RailNatter rating for the North South West Wales feasibility report? What do you think, folks? What are you reckoning? I'll tell you what, while this is up, making sure that my face is in the bottom corner, which it is, good. While this is up, I'm just going to say, a few things. Saying HST Trains is saying maybe a GIS-based report could work. Well, I mean, possibly, but again, the problem with it, the report is the report, and they've just looked at an existing route, so it's not useful. Rail Focus has already said what Chris is saying. Michael C is saying, can we do an episode where we go back and rank previous reports, such as the IRP? Yeah, we ought to, shouldn't we? Howard Meow, if there is anyone this stupid, is there any chance of anything actually being built backwards like this? No, there's no chance this is happening. Michael C is saying 0 or maybe 0.5. 0, 0, 0, 0 Pandrel clips into negative ground on par with Network North. Arguably, the IRP was better than today's Liverpool Manchester nonsense. However, I was saying, oof. Oh, I don't know about that. Yeah, we'll have to have a look. Report failed successfully. 0, no effort made, no credit given. Yes, that's correct. It gets 0. This is a report that gets 0. I cannot give it any more than that. And this is the point where we have to talk about EY and Atkins Realis. We have to talk about these two and why this might have happened, why we've got to the point where this sort of stuff happens. And why have I put up EY and Atkins Realis? Because on one side you have look down and see what my face is doing in the bottom corner. Hello, it's still me in the bottom corner. On the one hand, you have what I call the pure consultants, the EYs of the world. They're people whose job title is consultant. They are generally not the people you should have writing reports about public transport, because they don't understand the things that engineers know that allow you to do clever stuff to make an option feasible. They often also don't really do a very good job of articulating the benefits. They can write very generic business case stuff, but they don't really understand what a railway is for, how it fits into the fabric of how railways actually function, things, operational timetables and such. So I don't think that pure consultants are the right people to be writing these reports. On the other hand, you have organizations like Atkins Realis. I would describe them, although this is actually within the organization. When I was at Atkins, it gobbled up. Wait a minute, let me check which one it gobbled up. E.C. Harris was Arcadis. Who was the one that Atkins gobbled up when I was there? Oh, anyway, there was a big pure consultancy that Atkins gobbled up, subsumed, and merges this way, that way. The effect has been to water down what I call applied consultancy. Now, applied consultancy, people who are applied consultants have job titles like engineer, senior engineer, things of this nature. They actually have skills and knowledge. And the trouble is that the Atkins Realises of the world have been getting converted fairly rapidly by acquisition and by bad management and by the way of the neoliberal world into the pure consultants. They're a waste of time. Now, you might be going, yeah, but this was written by an engineer, and therefore the opposite is true of what you're saying. Well, yes and no, because the enshittification of applied consultancy, of engineering consultancy, has also stifled, in the process of engineering consultancy, has also stifled the ability of engineers to remember what they are for. In actually, they should be understanding and defining what those benefits are. As an engineer, trained as an engineer, I'm capable of writing a report that looks at those options, that considers what are the social benefits and impacts and potential downsides socially of this new railway system, this new transport corridor along here, and what might that look like, and why are we choosing a railway over other options? What could we be doing in the meantime? Things, questions like this. Really critically and fundamentally, engineers must relearn their role in society. This is a big problem with engineering consultancies. It was a problem, I'm seeing it get worse and worse through the years that I've been in engineering consultancy. Is the watering down of engineering skills is certainly also happening. Lots of nonsense, lots of disconnect. There's all the ethical issues with engineers currently just not thinking about what they do stupid things like, generative AI and incorporating things of this nature. But fundamentally, that lack of ethical knowledge, take that again. Fundamentally, that lack of ethical knowledge, combined with the lack of understanding why we do the things we do in the first place. Why are we building railways? Why are we doing this? What's it for? Who's it benefiting? How can I show and sell the purpose of this railway? A thing that engineers used to have to do back 150 years ago. Why am I doing this? Engaging with local stakeholders, understanding what they need, shaping any proposals to ensure that they get what they need, along with the strategic overall benefits. Actually, the Stevensons of the world, back in the 1830s, 1820s even, but certainly 1830s, understood that you had to paint the local and national picture. You had to understand the national picture as you start from the point of 1830 onwards. In fact, once you started having modern railways as we understand them developing, and the understanding at that point of the fact that the railways are a system of systems, engineers were doing this, and now we have much more knowledge. We have much greater understanding of mobility in totality and how we implement solutions to maximize people's mobility whilst minimizing environmental and carbon impact, and making sure that it gets delivered reasonably efficiently and quickly and cost effectively, and that we prioritize things right. Those are all things engineers should know. And actually, one of the challenges of engineers going, here's my job code, I'm going to do the little siloed thing I'm thinking about, and not particularly goes to my discipline, actually, because track engineers are often the ones who stitch all this stuff together and end up doing the early stage stuff. In this case, it was a civil engineer, but track engineers often end up doing this too. You should understand all this stuff. And if you don't, then that's fine, but you're limiting what you should absolutely therefore not be at the helm of a report like this. Folks, yeah, it's not good. It is not good. So, hi, Stronaut. Could you go through one of your reports, or another good one, to describe what makes a good report and what things to avoid? Well, you can go back to the Borders Railway episode. What was that, 214, was it? Where we go through, I think, the report that I did. I can't remember exactly how much detail, but we do that. Thanks, hi, Stronaut. Howard Meow, have we heard that Paris is getting its own Dangleway version of London Dangleway line cable car instead of a metro extension later this year? No, I haven't. That's very depressing. Detour is saying, just think how much worse these reports are going to get with ChatGPT. Yeah. Crikey. I mean, I would be putting a more... If I was any client organization, I would be ensuring that within my contracts, I say that any evidence of the use of generative large language models, generative AI, will preclude payment. Like, that means, this report is out of scope, it's non-compliant, we will not pay you for it. ChatGPT should not be used for anything to do with these reports. Anything, whether it's Excel wrangling, whether it's creating fluff. If any text is going to a report like this that's generated by ChatGPT, that text should not be in the report. It's as simple as that. It doesn't matter whether it's detailed, technical, safety critical engineering, or whether it's feasibility that's defining whether politicians go for a mobility project, a transport project like this. ChatGPT stuff should be nowhere near any of this, because ChatGPT spits out junk. Anyway, the usual podcast locations for this audio only. So hello to everyone in audio only version. Hi, you listen to a clipped down version of this podcast. I hope you enjoy it. The usual plugs, but with additional detail around what Patreon will get you going forward. So this isn't quite implemented yet. Patreon.com/Gareth Dennis. At the Patreon, we will be splitting into kind of, I think, probably a £1 tier and then the £5 and above tiers. What I do with the intermediate tiers, I'm not entirely sure yet. That is a little bit for you to say what you're willing to do at that point. So £1 gets you exclusive Discord channel access, it gets you merch discounts, it gets you appearance in the end credits, and it gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling that you're supporting me and what we do here to get the word out on how to do transport better. But £5 and above will get you all of the £1 stuff. It will get you a weekly bonus Rail Natter short that will be coming fairly soon. It will get you Q&A sessions. It will get you a free copy of the How the Rails Will Fix the Future audiobook. It will get you first dibs and discounts on event tickets, and it will give you some behind-the-scenes previews of things coming up. So yeah, that's what Patreon can get. The advanced, newly refurbished, soon to be updated Patreon will give you those things. The other plugs, of course, are GarethDennis.co.uk/merch for the merchandise. Plenty of it on there, and more to be added soon, I hope. And GarethDennis.co.uk/merch. No, GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord for the Discord server where this continues ad infinitum. So them's the plugs. Oh, the other plug, of course, a reminder again, hopetowndarlington.co.uk/what's-on/Gareth-Dennis-talks for the 4th of June and the 10th of September talks on the past and the future of railways. Should be fun. Again, a reminder, it's on the website. Please book ahead to make sure that these events can go forwards. If 2 or 3 people are coming along, they won't, as was the reason the previous one was cancelled. So please do get involved. Plenty of stuff on the website. You can go in there, have a read about what they're going to be. I'm looking forward to delivering them. Hopefully a good showing of all of you lot there as well. It'd be nice to see lots of you there. Bring your books and I'll get signing. I look forward to it. And very excitingly, I get to say what's happening next week, which is that we are being joined, finally, we have got Victoria Scott joining us, the wonderful, the effervescent, and the brilliant Victoria Scott joining us to talk about why in the hell driverless cars will never exist. I'm so excited about this episode. It's going to be great. An absolute delight to finally have managed to organise myself and get Victoria on. I'm extremely pleased about this one. It'll be fun, chilled out. I'm excited. Now, lastly, it only really remains for me to sort of say a big thank you to everyone for listening. We've run a little long, but not too bad. So a delight to have you all along with me, and I hope to see you. I hope to see you next week for next week's episode, and quite a few other fun ones planned in too. A frustrating. It's a couple of questions I will answer. Howard Meow, I was thinking, how do we build railways in the first place? And combining local and national is a satisfying answer. Yeah, part of the reason. James Bedford's asking, Archipelago when? Very good question. I would love to give you an answer on that one, but a few things need to fall into place first. Like I have said, I will not resume the series until I have done my chartership. So chartership needs to happen first. It's a personal target that I absolutely have to follow. Yes, so there we go. What else? That's it. That's fine. No other questions and chats. So this is a delight. Yeah, Door Hanger 93, a crossover for the trans people with train and car autism. Yes, exciting, good stuff. So I wave my hand. I don't know why I quite did it that way, but that's fine. Everyone, a delight to have you along. Cheerio.